Hey guys, Chris Cook in Nashville here. Today I'm really excited to share with you guys how I do a yakitori dinner, completely carnivore friendly. Yakitori, if you have not had it or ever heard of it, is essentially a grilled chicken on a stick kind of thing that comes from Japan. They do a bunch of other stuff as well, but traditionally yakitori is grilled chicken on a stick. Now, I live in a townhome and I can't have a grill here, so instead of having like the little yakitori charcoal grills, I do this with an air fryer. So I'm gonna show you guys how to do a yakitori dinner with an air fryer. We're gonna break down chicken thighs, which is what this is traditionally made from. I'm gonna show you how you can use the meat to make the tsukune, which is the chicken meatball. You can also use this technique for your chicken nuggets and a whole bunch of other things, so that's gonna be a really cool technique to know. And then also to include with this for my lovely wife who is keto, I have a bacon wrapped asparagus version of this, which is also very popular in some places in Japan. So I'm gonna show you several different kinds of yakitori, how we break it all down, how we prepare it, how I air fry it, and a few of the ingredients that make this taste like it has Asian flavors along the way. So guys, stick around. This is Chris Cook in Nashville. Let's make some yakitori.
Okay guys, so here's our process. I have for 2 people 4 chicken thighs. You can make more or less, and instead of giving you a recipe, I'm going to give you ratios. These are on the bone and they have the skin on. That's what you want. Okay, and we're going to season these heavily with some Redmond's salt. This is going to be about a teaspoon probably per chicken thigh, but you just want to season this so that it is saltier than what you would normally make this if you were going to just cook the chicken thigh. Because what we're going to do is brine it, and that's the easiest way to get the right amount of salt in your brine. Then we're going to add vinegar. This is going to be a couple of teaspoons per chicken thigh. It's not really exact. You just want to make sure there's enough in there. So that's probably about 2 tablespoons or so, 3 tablespoons for these 4 chicken thighs. And then this is cold water, and I'm just going to pour enough water to cover these chicken thighs. You don't want them just totally swimming in water, but you do want to make sure there is enough that they will all remain completely submerged. Now you can leave this in a bowl in your fridge for a few hours, or if you want to do this a day or 2 ahead of time, pour that mixture into a Ziploc bag, mix it up really well, and you can stick this in your refrigerator and you can brine it for a couple of days. When it comes out of the refrigerator, they're going to kind of look like this. You can see I've got them on a cutting board. I've got a sheet pan next to me because we're actually going to break these 4 thighs down and we're going to separate out the various pieces. You're going to need a really sharp knife, and if you don't have one, a sharpening steel or a honing steel, it's going to be really helpful because we need a sharp knife to break these down. And what we're going to do is pat these dry with paper towels. That's going to make these much easier to work with. So we're just going to pat these dry, and then I'll show you how to break them down. Okay, once these are well patted dry, I'm going to use the honing steel on my knife. I'm keeping this at about a 20-degree angle, and you're just going from side to side and sliding that knife blade along the honing steel just so you can make sure that it doesn't have any weird spots they're going to catch. And we're just going to hone that knife up real quick. You don't have to do this, but I want to make sure my knife is nice and sharp so that way you have the easiest time cutting this chicken. All right, once our chicken has been patted dry, we're getting ready to break it down. We're going to get 3 different kinds of yakitori out of these chicken thighs. I'm going to show you how we do this. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to take that skin off of the chicken thigh because that's going to be our first kind of yakitori. And that way we have it out of the way, and then we can remove the bone and fillet the meat off of the bone so that we can break this chicken thigh down. There's 2 different parts. There's going to be an outer part of the thigh that we're going to kind of slice off. That's going to be a little bit darker and softer of a meat, and it's a different kind of texture than the other part, which is a little lighter and firmer. So that's where we're going to get our 3 different kinds of yakitori from. So we're going to set this up on the cutting board once they're all dry, and we're going to go ahead and break them down. Okay, so we've got our chicken thighs all set up, ready to break down, and I'm going to walk you through this process so I can show you how to have each of the different kinds of yakitori. I'll put them in various piles over here so we can see about how much of each one we get. Okay, first things first, we need to take the skin off of the chicken, so I'm just finding this place where it's starting to peel off anyway. You can stick your finger under there and there's a pocket between the meat and the skin. Just kind of grab that and pull those two things apart. Now you can see there's connective tissues there. It's collagen and various things holding that together. Just split that off and peel this chicken skin off of the chicken thigh. This is going to be the first thing we're going to use to make yakitori, is this chicken skin. There's going to be some extra fat. If that doesn't come with the skin, it kind of sticks to the meat, that's okay. But just go around the edges, peel that skin off, break it away, and you have one whole chicken skin from the thigh. And there's a little piece of bone there. Make sure you're watching out for that when you get this from the butcher or the store. But there's our first chicken skin. We're just going to do that with all 4 of them so that we have skinless chicken thighs with the bone. Okay, my next step with this chicken thigh is going to be to trim some of these little fatty bits. Now, these are going to get trimmed and then they're going to go into a bag in the freezer. You don't have to throw these away. They can be used for other things, but I don't like the flavor of them just in chunks fried by themselves in the air fryer. So I'm just going to go around and trim this up. You don't have to be overly picky, but if you see like these big hunks of gooey fat, or especially the hard fat that's kind of firm when you squeeze it, that's the kind of fat that I cut off. You don't have to do this. I just think it makes for a nicer product. And then usually on this side, there's one big streak of fat on the chicken thigh. I always like to cut that off, and then I'll put that into my chicken fat trimming bags, and then we'll continue breaking it down. Okay, our next steps, we're going to lay the chicken thigh flat side up, this cut side, so that we can get the bone out. Now you can see there's kind of a large end to the bone right there where it was cut through. You can kind of see the double knuckle part right there. Okay, and then there is a slightly rounder end on the other side, depending on how your butcher has cut this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find that bone end to end, and we're going to actually slice from that rounder end where the bone is closer to the side of the thigh. We're going to go down towards the larger end of the bone. And what I'm doing is not right on top. I'm slightly off to the side, just a little of the bone, making little short cuts. And I'm just going to work my way down the side of that bone, keeping as much meat as I possibly can. And what I'm doing is, as it's doing this, I'm rolling my knife a little bit around the side of the bone, and you can see I'm coming underneath of the bone. And then you can actually reach in there and pull the bone the other direction so that you can get behind that bone and cut through that meat. Now again, little short strokes. You don't want to take great big slices here, but you want to get little short strokes until you get that meat free. You can kind of scrape the knife then along that bone once it's starting to come free. And when you get to the bottom here, there's some cartilage and things. Find the soft spot at the bottom of the bone where you can cut through. Okay, kind of move your chicken around if you need to. Get underneath of the end of that bone, cut that free, and look there. There's a bone that's going to go into our bone bag to make bone broth. So I'm going to move that over here out of the way. Then I'm going to re-flatten the chicken. Now, you need to go through and feel to see if there's any pieces of bone, hard pieces of cartilage, things that you can tell are not meat. And when you find them, and you probably will, okay, just go underneath of them and just cut those little pieces out, slice those little pieces, because no one wants to be eating and break a tooth. Now these, I don't want these to end up in my food. They're hard. They're not particularly pleasant to try to chew on. I usually just throw those out. I don't find those to be helpful to put in bone broth or anything. So I'm patting it down again. I'm feeling to see if there's anything else hard. And as soon as I realize I've gotten all of that out, I'm going to then switch over and look for any big lumps of fat or like squishy cartilage type stuff. It's maybe not bone, but it's hard or chewy or something that's not going to cook up very well. You can totally leave something like that on. You can add it to bone broth or trimmings. You can cook it. I don't find it to be very pleasant. It's one of the few things on something like this that I do get rid of, along with those little pieces of bone. So I just find the little spots where it's attached, take those little tiny pieces out that are kind of hard, cut those off. Just continuing to feel, make sure there's no other bones in there, and that is a cleaned chicken thigh. Okay, now this is the part that I don't know if Japanese chefs do, but I do this. I find there are 2 different kinds of meat on the chicken thigh. There is a larger chunk, and there's a much narrower chunk, and there's kind of a line that runs between the two. You can see it right there. Okay, I'm just going to cut this along that line, and I'm going to show you why, because the two sections of muscle actually kind of cross over each other, but this makes this easier. We're going to take this first thinner piece. This is mostly this darker reddish colored meat, and the darker colored stuff here, it's a little softer. I like to separate out the darker from the lighter portion of the thigh because it just gives you two different kinds of chicken. It's fun, it's nice. So I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to clean up these little bit of like fat and chewed up bits and all that kind of stuff. And then you can see I just took that piece of red meat that was kind of hanging off the end there. I cut that free, and that's going to go over onto my tray. Now I'm finding where this reddish colored meat separates from things like the fat and these lighter bits of meat. You can see there's kind of two different colors. We're going to separate those, and we're going to find the line where those two kind of come together, and that's right there. So I'm going to make that cut, turn it around, and then slice at an angle that way. That is a chunk of the redder color meat, which is much more tender than the lighter stuff. So I'm just going to cut these up in chunks. They're maybe like 1/2 inch size pieces. It doesn't have to be exact. This is just going to make your life easy. And then this chunk right here, you can see it's lighter colored. It's got a little bit different texture. There's some fat kind of running along the top of it here. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to peel off any of this stuff that's like maybe a little weird or kind of fatty looking or doesn't really seem to be something that I want to put into my yakitori. I'm going to put that into my trimming pile. And then this right here is mostly that lighter color meat. If you find any spots where there are chunks of that darker colored meat, just go ahead and trim those off, add them to your dark pile. And then this, I'm just cutting it up into chunks so that I have a lighter meat pile, and that's going to go into a separate place than the darker, which I have over there in the other corner. Now we're going to move on to the bigger piece of the chicken thigh, and you can see as you flip it over, it's mostly white, but there is a little bit of a layer of that darker meat that comes over on top of this muscle as well. So first of all, there's this loose piece that kind of hangs off. It seems like it's on every chicken thigh. If there was a place on a chicken that would be called a nugget, this would be it. It's this little round oyster-shaped kind of nugget of meat that goes into the dark pile. That is the best piece of meat on the chicken in my particular opinion, at least when it comes to this kind of stuff. And now I'm going to go in here and I'm just looking for these places where the meat is darker. And I'm just cutting those off, slicing those away, and cutting those into little pieces. And I'm just continuing to turn it around. Now you can see there's a place where as I'm trimming away this fat, you'll find places where there's a natural break where the muscle wants to separate. Okay, when you find that, that's the place you want to start using the knife to separate these darker and lighter parts of the thigh. Then once I get that done and I get that cleaned up on the cut side, I'm going to cut this into strips. And those places where that meat wants to separate, that's naturally going to start coming apart. So I cut this into 3 pieces. I just find that to be the easiest to work with. Then you can see how on one side this is darker, and on one side it's a little bit lighter because there's that natural place where it is starting to separate. So I'm just going to stick my knife in here, and I'm continuing to clean up some of the extra fat. That's sort of a little weird trimmed piece there that I'm going to throw into my trimming bag. And then you can see there's a line. You can kind of tell right where my knife tip is there's a line where these various pieces are coming across and connecting to each other. And I'm using those natural lines in the chicken to cut the dark meat away from this now flatter piece of white meat. And I'm going to throw that all together. Now I realize this is not white meat. This is all dark meat. It's all chicken thigh. But on the chicken thigh, I'm referring to the 2 different kinds of meat, the darker, more tender, and the lighter, more firm. Okay, now you can really see on this piece right here how that naturally starts to separate from the lighter meat to the darker meat. See, I didn't even have to cut it. It just pulled apart because that's where those muscles naturally separate. So again, separate the darker part from the lighter part, cut it up into chunks, and separate that into your 2 different piles. This is much softer when you have this darker part of the thigh, and it's just a really nice experience to have 2 different flavor sort of texture combinations of this chicken. Now this last little strip here is basically just all the lighter color meat, so I'm just going to cut that up in chunks, put that right there, and that is how we break down all of the meat of the chicken thigh. The only thing now we need to do is cut our chicken skin. Okay, there's no real crazy art to this. I'm just going to cut this into pieces about that size, and this is more about how you put it onto the skewer than it is how you actually cut it. So what I like to do is just get that little loose piece that's kind of on the end first, then you spread out the chicken thigh. You can see there's a natural curve right here where that thigh comes down on the chicken where it's shaped around the bone. I like to cut right through there, move the larger piece away, take this smaller piece, and then I cut that into sort of rectangular shapes, about 3 of them, just like this, okay? I'm going to move that over and then take the larger piece of skin from the chicken thigh and then flatten it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut across this way and across that way and cut this into about 6 pieces, okay? Now, if you break down a chicken skin a different way, you have another way that you like, you want to do different size pieces, you can do whatever you want here. But I like to cut this into either 6 or 9 pieces depending on the size of the skin. That's just the way I like to do it. You can do whatever you want. This isn't really vital. You're basically going to end up putting this on a skewer and wrapping it all up anyway, but it just makes it a little easier to work with by cutting it into pieces, okay? So we take that bigger chunk, I've cut that into 3 strips, and then I'm cutting each of those 3 strips into 3 pieces, so we get a total of 9 out of that. That is how we break down a chicken thigh and separate it into the lighter meat, the darker meat, and the chicken skin, and then our bones and our trimming can both be put into the various bags to go in the freezer. So I'm going to do that with the rest of these chicken thighs, and then we will catch back up. Okay, guys, here's just a quick look at my separated chicken thigh pieces and the little bamboo skewers that I'm going to use to do my yakitori, okay? So these are the bones. Those are going to go in my bone bag to make bone broth. This is my trimmings to go in my fat trimmings bag. That's a pile of chicken skins that are in about 1 to 2 inch quarter pieces. This is the whiter of the meat, which is a little bit firmer, and then this is the darker meat, which is a little softer and more tender. Okay, so there's our 3 kinds of yakitori meat that are going to come in chunks, and then our trimmings. Now let me show you how we're actually going to make these yakitori pieces. So I'm just going to scoot this over. So you're going to take a skewer, and I like to use these little paddle skewers. They're easy to work with. I'm going to do the white meat, and you're just going to push through. Make sure that skewer is going between your fingers. Don't stab yourself in the finger. But you're just going to take these little pieces of meat, and you're going to start stacking them up, okay? Now, you can actually stack these against each other. It's going to keep them from overcooking to stack them onto the skewer, okay? I'm going to fill this up. Now, the benefit is because we're doing this in an air fryer, you don't actually need to soak your skewers because they're not going to burn. So when you stack that chicken on there and kind of squeeze it down like I just did to make sure it covers the skewer, there's a little piece of tip sticking out, that's fine. But squeeze that down like I'm doing right there gently. That evens everything out, and that is how we put the chicken meat onto the skewer. Now, the dark part of the thigh is going to be basically the exact same, but you will find as you do this, this is going to feel softer. And if you have these kind of loose pieces, sometimes this darker meat, it's a little longer, just fold it over and stick that little loose corner across the skewer. See, there's another one, so I just fold it over and stick it through a second time. So all you want to do is just keep skewering these pieces, and if they're long and dangly, just take the part that's sticking down and stick it on as well. We're going to fill up this skewer with the dark meat, and again, you're going to feel as you use this darker part how much softer this part of the chicken is. That's why it's so cool to do this and keep these separated. So my lighter part's going to be there, my darker part of the meat is going to be there. Now let me show you how we do the skin. I think the skin is perhaps the more complicated of the kinds, but it's not that bad. So we're going to lay it out. It's kind of a square shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a corner, and you have to modify this based on the piece, but I'm going to go through the corner. Then I'm going to come through and go to the next corner that's right next to it. I'm not going to go across diagonally. I'm going to go across this straight edge into the next corner, and then you get this big dangly bit here, which I'm going to sort of twist and wrap around and stick through again. Because the skin is loose and fatty, you want it to be stuck through multiple times so that it holds it all together and it allows it to render all of that fat out without any of those corners like burning, okay? So I'll show you again through the corner, okay? We're gonna go across this straight side into the next corner, and then you have this big dangly bit that we're going to pull up, and we're going to go through it again, okay? And if you have any extra bits that are still dangling, maybe it's a large piece, you can even go through it a fourth time. But essentially, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to keep going until I have filled this skewer with chicken skin. Now, don't overpack this with chicken skin. When you're doing the skin, you want it to render out that fat, and you want it to be able to get crispy in the air fryer. So if you put too much on there, it prevents that from happening. Okay, so then once you get that filled up, you're going to squeeze that down. You want to create a little bit of space in between those pieces of the chicken skin. Unlike the chicken meat, we want some space so that it can crisp up. So that's how we're going to do this with all three kinds, the lighter, the darker, and the chicken skin. Okay, so here's our three kinds of yakitori. I've got them all on the sticks. We have the lighter part of the meat, the darker, and the chicken skin. I got 10 of the lighter meat. I got about 8 of the darker meat, and I got about 7 of the chicken skin. That's about what you can expect out of 4 chicken thighs. You might get a few more, you might get a few less depending on the size, but that's approximately what you're going to get if you use these little 3.5-inch skewers like I have. Now you can either put this in the refrigerator just like it is for an hour or so if you're going to cook, or you can cover this with plastic wrap and actually do this a couple days ahead of time, and then it's ready to cook a few days later, which is what I'm going to do. Okay, and real quickly now I'm going to show you how to do the tsukune, which is the chicken meatball. I have the meat of 4 chicken thighs here. I just bought these boneless, skinless because they were available. This is a cool way to do this. You can also use this technique to do things like chicken nuggets. So I just have, again, my knife. I'm going to make sure it's sharp so that I can cut these up easily. I like to do this every time I work with meat just to make sure my knife is going to work with me and not against me. So I'm going to take the chicken thighs that I have here, again, boneless and skinless, and I'm just going to trim any of the excess fat, and then it's going to go into my food processor bowl with a blade. As usual, I'm feeling the cut side of the chicken thigh, feeling for any pieces of bone or cartilage that maybe the butcher missed. Just trim those out. Those aren't particularly tasty, and they definitely are not enjoyable to try to chew up, and they're not good for your food processor. So work on getting those out of there. Just feel around with your fingers. Make sure there's nothing hard or rough in there. And then I'm also going to trim off just a little bit of the extra of these pieces of fat, just like we did with the bone-in chicken thighs. You don't have to. I just don't find them necessary. So again, those are going to be set off to the side. Those will go into my trimmings bag in my freezer. Okay, once the chicken thigh is all trimmed up, I'm just going to cut it into strips in this direction and then turn that around and cut that into chunks. These do not have to be cut small. I'm going to be using the food processor to process them up anyway. I'm just trying to make the job for the food processor a little bit easier by cutting these into some chunks, about 1-inch size, maybe 2-inch size chunks, just to make it easier on the blade. Okay, so now I have all of my chicken thighs in my food processor bowl. We're going to lock that down, push the blade down, get that locked in, and now I'm going to show you how we turn these into these tsukune chicken meatballs. So the first thing we're going to do is add a few pork rind crumbs. These are totally optional, but I just like the texture that it gives them. So I'm going to put in about 2 tablespoons of pork rind crumbs for these meat of 4 chicken thighs. Next is a very interesting ingredient. This is beef gelatin that I toasted in a dry pan until it turned to be a golden yellow, starting to brown color. Do not taste this by itself. It does not taste good by itself, but it is fantastic in something like this. That's about a tablespoon of that. Next, I've got about a teaspoon of Redmond's real salt that I'm going to sprinkle on top of. Then I'm going to do about a 1/4 teaspoon of white pepper, maybe a 1/2 teaspoon, depends on how peppery you like it. I stuck to about more like a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to do about a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, and then I'm going to do about a 1/4 teaspoon as well of onion powder. Okay, that garlic, onion, and white pepper flavor is really, really nice for anything like this that has kind of that Asian flair. Now remember, all these seasonings are optional as well. Next, I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of freeze-dried chives, and I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of freeze-dried parsley as well. You can modify this however you want. If you're super sensitive to seasonings and you don't want to use any of this, that's totally fine. You can just use salt and the beef gelatin that's been toasted and still get a great result. These don't bother me, and I'm not going to be eating a lot of this scune meatball anyway, so I went ahead and put some of this in there because it does taste great. One more optional ingredient, you don't have to, but I'm going to put in about a half teaspoon of shrimp powder. You could also use like a fish sauce or maybe some anchovy paste, something to give a little umami from that kind of seafoody thing that Japan really likes to use. So I'm going to put in some shrimp powder, and then I'm going to add also just a little bit of sriracha. Not much. This is probably going to be a quarter teaspoon at most. Again, this doesn't really bother me on carnivore. If you're really strict and you don't want to use any of this stuff, that's totally fine. But that shrimp and that little bit of the sriracha really makes a big difference in these meatballs. All right, last but not least, we are going to crack 1 egg in for roughly every 4 chicken thighs of meat. Okay, we're just going to crack that egg in there. We're going to put the top on, and we're going to start pulsing this. And then once it sort of breaks down and everything starts to mix together after pulsing, then you can turn it on, and we essentially want to turn this into a paste. Okay, so you can see this has now turned into sort of a homogeneous paste mixture. It's very sticky at this point because the protein has started to break down. So all I'm going to do is take a spatula and scrape some of the extra seasoning and sauces and egg and the different things that are kind of around the edges. We're just going to scrape that down into the chicken meat a little bit, and we'll pulse it sort of one more time. But you can see it has formed a cohesive, sticky chicken mixture, and that's exactly what we want. Okay, we're going to pulse it just a few more times just to make sure everything is well incorporated, and then I'll show you the actual texture of the mixture. Okay, so here is the mixture. You can see it's sticky, it is firm, it is all very much combined into one homogeneous mixture. That's exactly what we want. Now, there might be a couple little pieces here and there of the chicken thigh that don't exactly break up, and you can see them in there. That's totally fine. It's just going to get cooked in there with the rest of it anyway, and it offers a nice little textural change. So we're going to scrape this out into a bowl, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, so here's our yakitori. Now, I'm going to use these metal skewers instead of the little bamboo picks. And the reason that I'm doing that is because I just don't have enough of these bamboo paddle skewers. So I'm just going to use some metal skewers that I have. And I'm going to do these as large, almost like chicken sausages or a larger meatball sort of a shape. So I basically took my mixture. I've got 5 of these skewers. So I cut my mixture in the bowl into 5 different chunks. And all I'm doing is, you can see I'm squeezing it and pressing it around this skewer. Just press the skewer into the middle of it, press it around, form it into sort of a sausage type shape. And I'm just going to squeeze this around and then set it down on my cookie sheet here with the rest of my yakitori. This is the only one that's going to be cooked a little bit before we put it in the air fryer. So we just squeeze it into sort of a meat sausage mixture there on the skewer. And if your hand is sticking really bad, you can always put a little water on your hand, makes that a little easier. We're just going to do that for all 5 of these chunks of the chicken mixture for the scune, and then I'll show you what to do. All right, and here's our types of chicken yakitori. We have the lighter meat over here, we have the chicken skin in the middle, we have the darker part of the thigh on the right, and then we have our scune meatballs put around the skewers. Okay, guys, totally optional, but my wife is keto and she likes veggies, so I'm going to do asparagus. I am going to bend the asparagus and let it break. Wherever the asparagus wants to break, I'm going to break that bottom piece off. That is going to be the woody, chewy part that's not particularly good. So you just bend it and it will tell you, yep, right there, that's where I want it to break. That's where it's going to be the best. And that way the pieces that we're about to serve are all tender and they're not chewy. Okay, so these pieces over here, we're going to cook these. These over here, you can throw them away. You can use them for something else, you know, if you're into that. But I'm carnivore, so I'm not going to worry about it. And then we're going to take these pieces of asparagus, the tops of the asparagus where it's tender, and that's what I'm going to make for my wife to have. Okay, so real simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and cut them into chunks that are about the same width as a piece of bacon, because we're going to make bacon wrapped asparagus. And if you make it about the same width as the bacon, it's very easy to wrap this up. Now, I have seen this pretty consistently where if you take the top of the asparagus after you've broken that bottom piece off, it seems like about 3 pieces is what you are going to get if you cut this to the width of bacon. It doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm just going to go through this and cut these pieces of asparagus into 3 pieces each. Okay, there are our pieces of asparagus. Now all we need to do is wrap them in bacon. Okay, so I counted. I had 10 spears of asparagus, cut each of them into 3 pieces, so I have 30 chunks. I have 6 pieces of bacon. I'm going to cut each of them into sections of 5, so that way we have exactly 30 pieces of bacon. So I'm going to cut it into 2/3 on one side and 1/3 on the other, and then I'm going to split both of those. So I basically get a 5-piece section out of each slice of bacon. And then we're just going to wrap each one of these with that bacon. If you're carnivore and you're not doing this, that's fantastic. But if you decide to do this for someone because you're keto, you're ketovore, someone you love is keto or ketovore, and you're doing this, this is perhaps the hardest part. So we're going to take this piece of bacon and you're going to kind of stretch it a little bit. Bacon is a little stretchy. Just don't pull it so much it tears. But you're going to wrap it around the piece of asparagus. And then, and this is the hard part, you're going to take the skewer, you're going to try to catch that little lip of bacon that you just wrapped around there and pinch both of those pieces together and skewer it so that it holds that piece of bacon on there really tight. It takes a little bit of practice. Depends on how big your asparagus is. You might have to cut longer pieces of bacon than I did. But again, it is a little stretchy, so if you need to, you can kind of wrap that around there, try to overlap it, and then use the point of the skewer to just catch that edge right there, and we're going to skewer that. Now, again, as you do this, be careful. Don't stab yourself in the finger. Let that go between the fingers. Don't stick it into your finger. And I found that I can get about 3 of these on these little 3.5-inch skewers that I have. If your paddle skewers are longer or whatever you're using, you can probably fit more, but 3 works really well for me. So I'm going to wrap the rest of these in bacon, stretch it out, wrap it around, and I'm going to end up getting 10 skewers of 3 little sections of asparagus wrapped in bacon on each one. Okay, and it's a little bit of a labor of love, but I love my wife, so I go to the trouble of doing it for her because she really, really enjoys this one. So there's our bacon-wrapped asparagus. That is going to complete all of the preparation. Now all we need to do is cook our yakitori. Okay, first things first, we need to get these tsukune meatballs cooked. If these were smaller, I would just do them in the air fryer, but what I'm going to do, because these are so large, is put them on a parchment sheet, on a cookie sheet. I'm going to stick these in a 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes, and they should be firm and springy when they come out. That way I just know they're cooked through, and I can use the air fryer to finish them, but I don't need to get them cooked all the way through. If you're just doing small ones on the little skewers, you can just do this in the air fryer, no need to use an oven. While the tsukune are in the oven, here's the other things I'm going to need for the rest of the yakitori. I have in this it's probably about a half a cup of my beef-based soy sauce alternative. That's going to be used for basting these. And then here I have a batch of my spreadable butter mayo and a little bit of that carnivore soy sauce alternative. I'm going to add just a little squirt of the sriracha on top of it, about a 1/4 teaspoon. I'm going to mix that with that mayonnaise. That's going to end up being our dipping sauce. And then the carnivore soy sauce alternative in the bowl over there by itself is going to end up being our basting sauce while we're cooking. Okay, so I'm just going to make my dipping sauce. Very simple. Mayo, about a tablespoon of the carnivore soy sauce alternative, about a teaspoon of vinegar, just a little bit to cut through it, and then that 1/4 teaspoon or so of sriracha. You don't have to use that, but I really like it, so I'm just going to mix that up as a dipping sauce. Okay, dipping sauce is finished. That can be stirred together and put back in the fridge, and then we can get ready to cook the rest of the yakitori. Okay, this is an optional step, but I'm going to add about a teaspoon of that toasted beef gelatin on top of my carnivore soy sauce alternative. I'm going to stir that in. It gives it a little bit of an umami, almost like a sesame oil flavor, but totally carnivore approved. So I'm just going to stir some of that into my soy sauce alternative, and then we use that as the basting sauce. Okay, here's my skune out of the oven. After 15 minutes, you can see they have browned. They are firm. They're springy to the touch. That bounces back. They're not soft and squishy, so they are technically cooked all the way through. We're going to finish those in the air fryer. Okay, here we are over at my air fryer. You can use any kind of air fryer for this. I'm using this insert. I do also have like a grill grate or an air fryer basket as well. I have both those options. You can use something like that if you want. I just don't find it necessary. I actually like to use just this insert that is the pan that's in the bottom of the air fryer. That's just what seems to work best for me, but you can do this however you want. Okay, you're also going to want a clean cookie sheet because as you cook this, you're going to take it out of the air fryer, spread it out on this cookie sheet, and then we're going to put it in the oven on a keep warm setting while we continue air frying. Okay, and I'm going to use a little bit of bacon grease to grease my air fryer, just enough that it's not going to stick. You don't need very much. I'm just going to use a little bit just to give it a slightly non-stick greasy coating. So I've got my air fryer turned on as high as it will go. I'm going to let it preheat for a few minutes so that it's really, really nice and hot. And you're basically going to do this at the maximum temperature your air fryer will let you cook at because these pieces are so small, they cook through quickly. We want to try to get the color on the outside, get them browned as if they were on a grill, and they'll cook through no problem. Okay, folks, there's been a lot of steps to get here, but we are ready to air fry. My air fryer is preheated, ready to go. I have my basting sauce and a basting brush that I'm going to be using as I am air frying, and we're ready to cook some yakitori. Okay, here's my pan of yakitori. I like to do it in this order: the skune, and then the bacon-wrapped asparagus, and then the chicken up on top. It just seems to work best in that order. It gives you the best product. That's the way I like to do it. I recommend you do the same. So let's get to frying. Okay, step number one, we're going to open up the air fryer, and you can see it's nice and smoky. It is very preheated. That bacon grease is smoking. That's perfect. It's going to give us that smoky flavor. And the skune is going to go in first. So I'm just going to set those in, and we're going to let those cook first. Okay, the skune are in. Those are going to go in for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we're going to baste them. All right, this was about 3, almost 4 minutes on high. You can see they're starting to turn a brown color. Now we're going to take our basting sauce, and we're just going to baste a little bit over the top. You don't have to put a lot. You just want to put a little over the top. It's going to give it a little flavor, and it's going to help that skin stay nice and tender while also getting crispy on the outside. Back in for about 2 more minutes. All right, here's our skune ready to come out. You can see they're nice and golden brown. They have a little bit of a skin on the outside, but they're tender, and they taste absolutely fantastic. So we're going to take those. We're going to put those on our clean cookie sheet, get some tongs, take those out of the air fryer. If they stick just slightly, that's okay. You can see all that golden brown stuff cooked to the bottom. That's actually good. That's going to be flavor that is going to translate over into all of our other chicken dishes. So these go into the oven on a warm setting. That's good that we have all of that cooked onto the bottom. We're going to continue adding more things into the air fryer, and we're going to get that flavor on everything. Next is the bacon-wrapped asparagus for my wife, and I'm just going to set that in there to air fry as well, continuing on high. Okay, we're going to shut the lid. We're going to check on that in about 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, after 3 minutes, this is what it's looking like, so we're going to go ahead and flip them over. And once they are all flipped over, you can see they're kind of browning on that one side. We're going to put them back into the air fryer. We're going to give them another 3 to 4 minutes, just like that. All right, 3 to 4 more minutes in, and they are looking just about perfect. I'm actually going to flip them and let them cook just 1 more minute on the other side again. Now, this is the only yakitori I'm not going to use the basting sauce on. The bacon just doesn't need it. It has plenty of flavor on its own, so I'm just going to flip these over and just do 1 more minute just to crisp up that other side just a little more. And after another minute, the bacon-wrapped asparagus looks perfect. So I'm going to take that, pull it out, put it on the cookie sheet, and it's going to go into the oven on a keep warm setting with the skune chicken meatballs. Okay, last but not least is our chicken meat yakitoris. We have the lighter meat on the right, the darker meat on the left, chicken skin in the middle. I like to do the dark and the chicken skin together, and then I like to do the light meat last. The reason for that is the darker meat being softer and slightly moister, it's harder to overcook it or to do anything to it where it's going to be dry. So if it stays in the oven on that keep warm setting for a few minutes, it's not a big deal. So I'm going to put the darker part of the thigh meat in just like this. Then we're going to add in our chicken skin. And then I like to take a mixture of Redmond salt, white pepper. It's about 3 parts salt to 1 part white pepper and a little bit of that toasted beef gelatin together. We're going to use that like a little bit of a sprinkling seasoning, and we're just going to put a light sprinkle. You don't want to heavily season this, but just put a light sprinkle over top of this so as it is cooking, you get that little bit of salt, that little bit of white pepper, and that beef gelatin that's been toasted that will cook down on top of this. All right, we're going to check on that in about 4 minutes. Okay, after 4 minutes, you can see this is cooking relatively quickly. Now, it has kind of a light color. That's okay. That's good. We're going to flip that over, and you're going to see all of that stuff that had cooked to the bottom of the pan is now starting to cook onto the other side of the chicken. That's where that roasty kind of flavor is going to come from. That's why I like using this pan that's going to be on all of these. So we're going to flip these over, and we're going to do about another 2 minutes on the other side. Don't forget to add another little sprinkling of the seasoning mixture if you're using that. You can just use salt if you don't want to use the seasonings. Just a light little sprinkle of that, and then we're going to put it back in for about another 2 minutes. Okay, after about another 2 minutes, this is where things are going to start to get interesting. So you can see these are kind of cooked on both sides. They're definitely going to be cooked all the way through, but we still need to give them a little bit more of that umami flavor, and this chicken skin needs to crisp up a little bit more. It's going to take a little longer to cook still. So what we're going to do is, as that chicken skin is shrinking down and as we're starting to see these are cooking all the way through, it's time to baste them. So we're just going to take our basting sauce, we're going to stir it up, we're going to baste these lightly, and then we're going to put them back in for about another 2 minutes. Okay, anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes later, you're going to open it up and you're going to find these beautiful golden basted chicken yakitori sticks with the dark meat and the chicken skin. So you can see they're bubbling away. All of that chicken fat has come out of those skins. That's really helped that other chicken cook well, and it's going to help that white part of the chicken thigh stay a lot more tender and moist when we cook it as well. So we can go ahead and remove these now. We're going to put these onto our cookie sheet, stick this back into the oven on keep warm, and we can cook the last kind of our yakitori momentarily. All right, and last is our lighter colored part of the chicken thigh. We have all of this extra fat in here now from those chicken skins, which is perfect. So we're going to put these in here. We're going to season them. We're going to baste them. We're going to do the exact same process as what we just did. You just want to make sure that these don't get overdone because they are a little firmer and they can easily dry out if you overdo this. So I'm not going to take these to as deep of a golden brown color. Okay, and there is our last type of yakitori coming out. They look beautiful and perfect. They're going to go on the cookie sheet. I'm going to stick them in the oven for just a couple of minutes while I get everything else ready, get our dipping sauces ready, and it's going to be time to eat, and these are going to be fantastic. All right, here's all of our different kinds of yakitori all laid out. We have our skune chicken meatballs. We have the bacon-wrapped asparagus for my wife. We have the chicken skin here in the middle, the dark meat on the top, and the slightly lighter meat on the right. Now, this is the extra fat that was in the bottom of the air fryer. I'm just going to use a brush and brush some of that extra fat with a little bit of that carnivore soy sauce mixture in there over the top right before serving this. Just makes it glisten. It makes it look really nice, and that little bit of extra fat and flavor always helps. Nothing wrong with that. When I say this was good, let me tell y'all, this was really, really good. I'm sure you guys are going to love this.
Okay guys, that's it. That is our yakitori. You can see I have a whole pan full of yakitori here. So we have the dark meat portion of the thigh, we have the slightly lighter meat portion of the thigh, we have the chicken skin, I have the skune meatballs, which I did as the large ones on the skewers today. You can make that from dark meat or white meat. It's just entirely dependent on what is on sale, what you have in the fridge, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the description below. If you forget any of the things I said in the video, that's there as well. And then I've got the bacon wrapped asparagus for my wife. So guys, this is super easy. What I'm gonna do is pair this with the mayonnaise, the sort of Asian inspired mayonnaise based dip that I made for this, that I showed you in the video. And we're gonna watch some TV. This is a fantastic finger party food. It's just a lot of fun to eat. It's one of my favorite things for us to make. And depending on how you want to use those spices, it's all flexible. You can make it as super clean or as loose carnivore or even keto as you want. And there's other veggies you can do if you're keto. Lots of options here. So guys, thank you so much for hanging out. If you haven't looked at it yet, down below I have a link for a Patreon page. If you would like to support the channel, you don't have to, but it's just a way that you can do it. I know there's some people asking if they could do that. That is below. I really appreciate everything that comes our way that way, just to help support the channel so I can make more of these recipes for you guys. There's also a link to my shop down below that has some t-shirts and sweatshirts and aprons and all kinds of fun stuff. So if you guys would like to support the channel and you want to get some swag out of it, that's a cool way to do it too. Regardless, just the fact that you're here means so much to me. Please leave me a thumbs up, give me a comment below, let me know you're here, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this with all of your friends. And I just appreciate every single one of you guys. That's why I do it, is because I just love you guys and I love being able to put this out there and show you just kind of how I'm doing my carnivore thing. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to stick around. I've got great recipes coming. I love every single one of you guys. Eat your meat, love your life. This is Chris cooking Nashville, and I'm gonna see you guys next time in the kitchen.